Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Henrie Bergson's Day Planner. And this is a special topic that I wanted to look at because it explores a key idea from the French philosopher Henrie Bergson, who was probably the most famous and influential philosopher just before World War II. And his stock sort of plummeted and he kind of disappeared. Mostly, he's had a couple of mini renaissances since then, but nothing close to where he was. But one of his central ideas, he had many ideas, but one of his central ideas is our experience of time. And I call it Bergson's Day Planner because I saw someone with one of these day planners the other day. And if you're as old as I am, or even a little younger, then you lived through the day planner craze of the, late 90s and into mid 2000s until the smartphone came along, and then everybody just translated this onto their smartphones. But it used to be that anybody who was serious, if you were a real person, then you had these calendars and they were indexed and you had cards that you could insert and they were color coded. I mean, it was like a whole world of day planners, and they were in grocery stores. They were just everywhere. There's just this explosion of day plannerification of your life. And what Bergson wants to point out is that this is a type of insanity, and that the kind of mind and worldview that's necessary for someone to have a day planner is new in the sense of quite modern. It's industrial revolution, and that it expresses a particular experience of the world that alienates us from ourselves. And so what Bergson wanted to point out is that our experience of time is not objective, that's a scientific idea, and that it's not that the scientific view of time as a discrete series of moments, that one that happens after the other, and that events have a beginning and an end, and they have this particular duration, and all these sorts of ideas about time, and that it can be tracked very clearly, can be graphed essentially. This is what a calendar is, and what clocks are. They're just a marking and a graphing mechanism for the passage of time. Runs completely counter to how we experience time, which he called la duree, which is as a process that's continuous and organic, does not have a beginning, a middle, and an end, is not tracked against any external graphable, identifiable thing. It's not consistent in the way it passes. It's all, it just violates all the rules of scientific timekeeping. And again, he's not saying that the scientific timekeeping is wrong. He's just saying it's a particular worldview, and it does not express how human beings actually experience the world. The example that I think always springs to my mind when things like this are being discussed is, people used to, maybe they still do, but people used to collect butterflies and pin them, they capture them, kill them, and pin them in a little frame. And you're like, what is the relationship of that butterfly to a living butterfly? Right? Like, it's nothing. Like, they're completely different. Not completely different, but you see the expression of like a living butterfly flying about in beautiful flowers is, there's some association, but the experience of them, the relationship is quite dramatically different. And when you chop time up, graph it, objectify it, and quantify it, then you have something that's very, very different from the way we experience time. So why does this matter, and what does this have to do with day planners? And to me, day planners are just the best expression of this possible. And it's not that there's anything inherently evil about the day planner, although perhaps there is. I mean, I do suspect at times, but let us be non-judgmental and say that a day planner is not inherently evil. But what happens is it shapes your way you view and experience the world. It makes certain things more valuable, more interesting, and seem more important, and makes other things sort of vanish or disappear or seem like they don't matter. And so what you need to do to put the world, your life, into a day planner is you need to break it down into a series of discrete experiences. Oh, eat lunch from 12 to 1, go to meeting from 1 to 2:15, finish report 3 to 5, pick up kids from school, whatever, and then you break this down, and then you have this whole series of discrete events, and you do those discrete events, and then you check them off as you go along. And then at the end of the week, you can total them up and see how you're doing on all of your goals. And right, day planner. So we should probably all familiar with this concept. And occasionally, because it was sort of a religious craze in the United States, at least, I would try to do this, and people would give them to you for your birthday, and so then you had a lot of day planners. It's just crazy. Anyway, I could never fill one out. I could never figure out what people were doing or why, and what I just couldn't. It was, my mind doesn't work this way, is what I finally realized. I'm just not a day plannery person. So what's going on here? So notice what happens is those things that can't be quantified and chopped up into little bits, scheduled and checked off of lists, don't functionally exist, excuse me, the more you get invested in your day planner. So for instance, love your children. Love your children from 10:15 to 11:30. No, I like to think that it's more of a continuous experience, right? Like there's not this time and moment and then all of a sudden this idea of quality time, which I think has mostly gone away, but was this idea that, it's not how much time you spend with your children, it's the quality of the time that you spend with your children. This idea came up, and I thought, there it is. This is an expression, because if it's simply love your children and be with them, see, that doesn't go in a day planner, and so it doesn't count. If you say, spend an hour and a half of quality time with my children doing, going to a museum or reading a book or something, that I can put in my day planner and check off. So that sort of discrete interaction becomes valuable and seems valuable, because otherwise it doesn't exist. Because you can't just, put that in there. And that's, you see, this is the problem. But the subjectively, you don't have this like, I don't love my children for 22 hours a day, but I have this hour and a half and maybe a little bit of time before and a little bit of time after I might love them. And then I don't anymore because I'm on to other things. See, we're not those sorts of beings, right? We do lots of things all at once, which is another problem, right? I like to listen to music and read books. And what am I doing? Do I put down, read book, listen to music? That's like, and then do it like on a schedule? That seems like a terrible idea. I don't need to put this on a schedule. I'll do it as much as I possibly can, right? And am I listening to music, or am I reading a book? Which am I doing? Well, it depends, and it varies, and the ratio is very changeable depending on the gauging of the music or my mood or the book, or, I'm sure we've all had this experience where you're reading a book and then time just vanishes. Notice it. This is that kind of experience, right? Like, again, people ask me, how long does it take to read a book? And one, of course, it varies dramatically with the book, but two, I just want to say, this is what Bergson is talking about. When I'm reading a book, time goes away. It's not a relevant measure, right? This is like, what kind of measure is how long does it take you to read a book? That's a silly measure. It's not. Books are not time. Books are experiences, and some books you read just like I refer to, it becomes the glowing ball of light, and all time, space, and dimension goes away, and you're just in this completely other place. And then you either finish it, or you get tired, or, you end the chapter and you kind of come back to yourself. How long was that? It was all time and no time, right? It was that infinite experience, all that just transcends any notion of time. Now, I can look at a clock and back figure how long I was reading, but this is not the same thing as, I read for this amount of time. And so, how long does it take to drink a bottle of wine? How long does it take to enjoy a summer's afternoon, right? Like time is, right? It's the wrong measure, right? You're asking the wrong questions. You're messing up the whole thing. You're misunderstanding what's going on. I mean, but when you have the day planner mentality, the objective scientific mentality, if you can't chop it up that way, then it doesn't exist. It actually doesn't matter. It doesn't rise to the surface of things that you can pay attention to. And so our minds, and this is what Bergson was driving at 100 years ago, and so I can't even imagine how he would feel about it if he was looking at the world today, is when your mind gets taken over by the scientific time view, which is not wrong, it's just a different one, you see the world as a series of discrete tasks. You're basically making yourself a factory worker in your own life. You're designing your life as a factory, which is, if I do a series of discrete operations on a series of discrete tasks, I will produce a specific product, and that product will be the product that I want, which, of course, is just an utterly alienating way of looking at your life. Your life is not a factory. You are not a factory worker in your life. Maybe you work in a factory, but that doesn't mean your life is as a factory worker. And you don't produce anything. You produce a corpse, I guess, maybe, but then that kind of gets reintegrated in the earth, or you get burnt and ashes spread someplace. Okay, that's kind of good. But you're not a machine that produces. Unsurprisingly, by the way, Gilles Deleuze, who was wrote about Bergson, has also written several books in which he refers to us as production machines, like the machine, and because he's responding to this kind of worldview that is created by the Industrial Revolution, the technocratic mindset. He ascribes this in part to the capitalist worldview against the sort of fortification, factoryfication of our minds and our lives. And so what happens is, while you're experiencing your life in duree, as a ceaseless flow of feelings and emotions and thoughts and imaginations and events and things, tastes and flavors that are all subjective, that are all highly psychological and emotional, we're trying to understand that process as a discrete, identifiable, objectifiable, measurable events and sequences that add up to something and produce something and make something. And that disconnect is, again, incredibly alienating. So rather than saying, oh, what are you doing tomorrow? And you could say, in your not day planner, you could say, fill it out and just say, enjoy myself. Like, what's the goal for tomorrow? Enjoy myself. See, that's enjoyment is not no, you got to break it down to, what does that mean? And you're like, well, it means I'm enjoying myself. Well, what are the what are the components of that? So then, to get it into the calendar, right, you immediately have to start taking joy or peace or harmony or contentment or flourishing or any of these things that we feel in, like sadness, ennui, all these emotions, love, desire, the effervescent sensibility of passing through our lives. No, that's no good. Okay, we need something that I can put on the clock for 11:15. And then, if you've ever worked with or talked to people who really love their day planner, you realize they have this sense that if they can just get their lives organized correctly, then everything will be good. And so they begin living, trying to get their subjective sensibilities to line up with this objective worldview. And again, this is just incredibly self-alienating, because you do not experience, this is this is just how it is. There's a few things I will say absolutely, but absolutely we don't experience time this way. It's perfectly clear. The time does not pass for human beings as a consistent, coherent, discrete series of measurable events. it passes. Sometimes time flies by, sometimes time stops, sometimes we lose all awareness of time. So, we all know this, we all experience it, but what we're told in the scientific view and with the day planner view is that's wrong. This is not how you experience time. This is not what the world is really like. Like the world should really be broken into these other bits. And we can, how many instances have you been in something like you're in a meeting that's scheduled to go for an hour, and the meeting, you're in 45 minutes, and finally you're really starting to get stuff done. And then, it's the hour has passed, and then people are like, well, I guess meeting's over. And it's like, well, wait, no, the purpose of the meeting was not to be an hour. The purpose of the meeting was to do stuff. And we're finally it feels like we're getting stuff done. Let's keep it going. But it creates tension because people are like, no, now I've got something else to do. And, because I'm scheduled, like I don't have the time to do the thing ostensibly we were supposed to do. Conversely, we've all been in the other meetings, I'm sure, where you're going, okay, we had an hour scheduled for this meeting. We're done. Like the meeting is done 20 minutes in and everybody knows it, but everyone's like, well, we're supposed to be here for an hour. And so again, the content, the experience, the whatever it is you're doing becomes subject to this arbitrary boundaries that are imposed because we're misunderstanding the world. We're not designing it or understanding it to the sensibilities of humans. So, for instance, the notion of that used to have seminars and classes and stuff, or meetings, things like this. Anything that's scheduled for like 2 hours. This is not a human time frame. There's a reason there's breaks in operas and plays and intermissions exist. It's because about 90 minutes. Notice this is about how long movies are. You can make a longer movie, but you can't make a lot longer movie unless you put an intermission in. And people go, oh, it's because of the, theaters want to make money and all this, which is partially true. But the other part of it is this is about how long people can sit and pay attention to anything. In India, by the way, they make like 6-hour-long movies, which is a whole different subject. But for the Western mindset, for the Western world, if you're actually trying to think or do anything, 90 minutes is your maximum. And really, in fact, 90 minutes is too long probably for most people. Think about 45 minutes, 50 minutes. That's about as long as people can really be in a space and exist there. Like that is a human, that's just sort of the rules. And when you try to press beyond that, what you're doing is you're trying to force the human experience into a time slot for some reason. I don't know why they decide these things, but they do. And they go, oh, we're gonna change this out. We're gonna change the dynamics. They're gonna concentrate for 3 hours. They're not gonna concentrate for 3 hours. This is not a thing that the humans like to do. And so, but we just work against ourselves because we try to do these sorts of discrete, productive scheduling notions that are not just functionally aren't human. And it's fine. And again, that's wrong to have a calendar and to go, oh, I need to be someplace at noon. I better write that down so I remember it. That makes total sense because again, notice why don't we remember things like that? Because this isn't how the humans experience the world. That's why you need a calendar. If this is how we actually experience time, you wouldn't need these calendars and date books at all because it would be natural and you'd go, oh, okay, yes, that slots in. The problem is we forget what day it is and we forget what time it is all of the time because it's so new, number one, and so unhuman, number two, because we don't feel the passage of time in the way that watches and calendars and clocks tell us we should. And so it makes sense that we use them because we're trying, right? Because we're trying to organize all of these people who don't have a sense of time. And how do so you've got to create these like arbitrary, agreed external metrics so that we can kind of arrive at the same place at the same time and have lunch or get on a plane. Because otherwise, it's really hard. And it becomes, then you're medieval again. Like, oh, meet when the sun is high. Okay, great. you can get a mob there, and you get a mob there right about a time, but it's going to be a 2-hour window. We like a much tighter window because we have this objective reference that allows us to get a much tighter window. The thing is, again, and this is what Bergson was on about, is it distorts our sense of reality when that takes over from the other, from the duree. And so to give you just an experience of this, or an experiment that you can run to see what it is that I'm rambling on about here, try and create a calendar or a day planner or a schedule that instead of focuses on tasks like, go to lunch, finish, do my banking, whatever it is, whatever the things are that we always list out that need to be done, you write down qualitative things. So these would be things like joy, love, awareness, sensibilities, flavors, smells, scents, like all of the qualitative part of our lives that we enjoy or dislike, and just not all joy and loveliness all the time, but all of that experiential side that is not objective but subjective, that is qualitative, not quantitative, and try and create a day plan around that. And I think if you're like me, even as someone who thinks about these things, it's just so weird. It's just really hard. And I came up with a sort of Venn diagram things where I have overlapping bubbles and, I want to feel this way, and I want to have vitality, and I want to have a sense of abundance. And, when you start sketching this out, and I thought maybe if I were more artistically inclined, perhaps I would use colors and assign emotions and feelings and sensibilities to different colors and experiences, and then create sort of a color map of my day. But then I wanted a third dimension somehow. I was running out of dimensions, and I couldn't figure out how to organize it. Anyway, I think it's a great experiment. You find your own results, but for me, I found one. I was no good at this. I did not crack this. Maybe if I'll work on it some more and see if I can make some more headway. But what it exposed was those actual experiences that we have, many of which we like. Yeah, it doesn't track that way. It's hard to create that, plan against, love my children. Okay, yes, I want to experience that all day, or think about your partner, or remember friendships from your youth, right? Have a memory, right? It just doesn't, it's but of course we do all this. We're doing this all the time. And if we're, again, even more in the, you'd say Hindu tradition, maybe even Buddhist tradition, but more Hindu tradition, they'll talk about breathing all the time. This is one of the big things they kind of keep going back. They're you're breathing. If you're not breathing, you're in trouble. So probably you're breathing, but we don't think about breathing unless something happens, and we don't plan to breathe. We don't put it on the calendar. Imagine that your day planner, every 30 seconds, take a breath, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Well, this is going to take a long time to write out. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Right? We don't, and so we ignore and overlook and just all of these processes that go on semi-autonomously or autonomously that are necessary, important, and even great, that, again, they don't fit in the day planner. And so there's just levels and levels and levels to this. And so when people say, hey, it's just stop and focus on your breathing, one of the things this does is sort of takes you out of the day planner mind. And so these sorts of exercise that people go, oh, this is very deep and very, spiritual and very insightful, and whatever language we use for them. Part of the reason that we feel this way when we do that is simply because we've been so colonized, we've been so overwhelmed by the other approach, by the scientific objective worldview, and this desire to quantify. And again, and to chop up and to make discrete so that it can be measured and put on a graph or a chart, or so it can be mathematized. and then we can manipulate it the way we like to with numbers. That sense of the world is so overwhelming that it just becomes totally alienating. And I think that's where we are. Not, of course, the other still exists. Otherwise, it wouldn't be alienating. If we didn't have the whole other experiences, is how we actually experience the world, it wouldn't be alienating, right? That's the magic, but it is. And so the more people try and press on us, the more it gets overwhelming. And an example I'll just use, another one as we exit, is if you go to the airport, I have to take a flight. And I was just thinking about this, and it's like, they give you the time, like your plane will take off at 4:23 or whatever the time is. They should not do that, because the one time you can be pretty sure your plane isn't going to take off is 4:23, right? But we glom on to the 3. And if the plane is not moving at 23, then we're late. It's like, well, late. Like, really? Is that late? I mean, could they just need to round more? They need to just say, I think planes should only be able to be scheduled at either the half hour or the 20 minutes or something like that. And just let everybody, so that we get the culture of like, hey, you need to be around the plane at 4:20. We're going to take off sometime around then. Not any time particularly. If we're off at the ground at 4:40, 4:45, 5 o'clock, it's all good. It's all good, people. Everybody just relax. This is not how we do it. And we say it's more efficient if we can do it at more tight tolerances. But we can't. Of course, anybody who's been to an airport and traveled realizes, these tolerances are all just made up and they're a lie. And so we shouldn't try to live that lie. But notice how much stress and anxiety and just discontent is generated when we try to force the world into this impossible structure. And then we try to live against it. It just creates chaos. It creates psychological dissonance that makes our lives very much less good as we experience it. And so this is what Bergson was on about, and one of the things he was concerned with, and one of the things that I just see is so prevalent, and again, the day planner world, that makes us just kind of drives the monkeys mad, because I'm doing the primate series, and I just keep thinking of it as monkeys. It does drive the monkeys a little bit mad, because this is not how we work. Again, we wouldn't need day planners if our minds worked this way. We need them because they don't. And when we allow these processes to overwhelm our lives, when we think of our lives as a series of tasks to be completed, products to be fulfilled, and goals to be met, what we're doing is destroying ourselves functionally. We're undermining our own sensibility and sense of the world. And I can say that with pretty good certainty, because our actual experience of the world is not reflected in that, and therefore it necessarily turns you against yourself. And again, it's not that there's no use for schedules or no use for planning and all that, because again, when you have a lot of primates that don't have a good sense of time, this helps us get organized. However, this is not how we experience in the world. And if we try to force our world experience into something like a day planner, trouble. All we're doing is making trouble for ourselves. So, Bergson's Day Planner. Thank you very much.